Zuri stepped into the dining room, the scent of roasted chicken and sweet pastries filling the air. She smiled, expecting a quiet birthday dinner with her family, maybe a few laughs and a slice of cake. But the moment she walked in, something felt off. Her mother, Amina, stood at the head of the table with a wide, almost theatrical grin, not directed at Zuri, but at her younger sister, Lela. "Happy birthday, Lela," her mother announced, lifting a cake that Zuri had assumed was for her. The candles flickered under the warm chandelier light, and relatives leaned in, clapping and whispering. Zuri froze. Her heart sank, a hot flush rising to her cheeks. She could feel eyes on her, some confused, some amused. Zuri's stomach twisted. All the little sacrifices, the late nights, the effort she poured into building her life, seemed invisible here. Lela, with her effortless charm and half-finished projects, was being celebrated like a queen while Zuri stood there, ignored. She wanted to speak, to remind everyone she existed, that her hard work mattered, but the words stuck in her throat. Pride and anger simmered inside her, a quiet storm threatening to break. The whispers grew louder, a subtle symphony of judgment and expectation. Zuri's mind raced, piecing together the old patterns she had ignored for too long. This was not just a birthday oversight. It was a declaration, intentional or not, of who mattered in her family. The humiliation pressed down on her, but beneath it, a spark of resolve began to form. Zuri sank into her sofa, the memory of her birthday humiliation still heavy in her chest. As she closed her eyes, flashes of her past swirled in her mind. She remembered the endless nights in her small Abuja apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her determined face, while the city outside slept. She had built her tech startup from scratch, coding lines of software until her fingers cramped, tweaking presentations for investors, and pitching her ideas to anyone who would listen. Every decision she made, every sleepless night, every skipped party or family outing had been a step toward something bigger, something she had dreamed about since she was a teenager. Yet none of that seemed to matter to her family. Her mother, Amina, always had eyes only for Lela. Even small things, like Lela finishing a college project or getting a promotion at her office, were praised and celebrated as if they were extraordinary feats. Meanwhile, Zuri's groundbreaking achievements, the deals that brought millions into her company, the mentorship she offered to young programmers, were often met with a polite nod or a fleeting smile, quickly forgotten. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about feeling seen, feeling valued by the people who should have known her best. Zuri remembered the moments that stung the most. Family gatherings where Lela's accomplishments were announced with fanfare, while Zuri quietly sipped her drink, trying not to show how much it hurt. Holidays spent listening to relatives gush about Lela's minor successes, while Zuri's hard-won victories went unmentioned. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was like a spotlight that shone on Lela while leaving Zuri in the shadows. The unfairness burned, but it also fueled something deeper, a quiet determination not to let anyone else define her worth. She thought about the sacrifices she had made along the way, turning down job offers abroad to focus on her startup, missing birthdays and weddings, working weekends when everyone else relaxed, and learning to navigate the tough world of investors and tech competitions, often as the only woman in the room. She had earned every achievement, but recognition at home, from the people who mattered most, had always been withheld. The contrast between her world and Lela's couldn't have been sharper. One sister was lauded for small, sometimes insignificant things. The other was overlooked despite achieving real, lasting success. That imbalance had left Zuri with a mixture of resentment and resolve. She didn't just want acknowledgement. She wanted her family to see her for who she truly was. And as she sat back on the sofa, her mind buzzing with memories and frustration, she realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a plan, one that would ensure her efforts could no longer be ignored. Zuri closed the door to her apartment and let out a long, slow breath, leaning against the cool wood as the sounds of Legos faded behind her. The birthday dinner, the whispers, her mother's proud smile for Lela, it all replayed in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. The humiliation had hit hard, sharper than she expected, but as the sting settled, something else started to grow inside her. Anger, yes, but also clarity. She realized that her worth didn't live in the approval of her family. Their favoritism, their petty comparisons, it had nothing to do with who she was or what she had accomplished. Sitting down at her desk, she opened her laptop, not to work on her startup, but to think. She needed a plan, something that would let her speak without words, that would show them all, her mother, her sister, her cousins, that she had built a life of her own. Every late night, every investor pitch, every long weekend spent coding was proof of her determination. And now, it was time to turn that proof into a statement. Her mind raced with ideas. She didn't want a fight, a shouting match, or humiliation in return. She wanted subtle power, a quiet but undeniable demonstration. Something that made them pause, made them reconsider how they had seen her all these years. She imagined herself entering a room with confidence, radiating calm control, carrying the evidence of her success. Every detail mattered, the timing, the setting, the impact. She would not just be noticed, she would be impossible to ignore. Zuri smiled to herself, a spark of satisfaction in her chest. She could feel her strategic mind at work, thinking 3 steps ahead. She considered every possible reaction, every possible whisper, every sideways glance, and how she could turn it to her advantage. She wasn't planning revenge, she was planning recognition, not for her ego, but for the life she had built with sweat, skill, and vision. The quiet resolve that settled over her was empowering. She realized that humiliation, while painful, could be transformed into fuel. The embarrassment she felt that evening wasn't the end of the story, it was the starting point. She would take control, not just of the narrative, but of how she allowed others to see her. By the time she leaned back in her chair, her plan was taking shape in her mind. It wasn't fully formed yet, but the outline was clear. She would return on her own terms, in a way that reflected who she truly was. No anger, no shouting, just undeniable proof of her accomplishments and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. The thought made her chest tighten with anticipation, a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Zuri understood one thing clearly. She didn't need their approval to feel proud, but she could make them see it anyway. And that was exactly what she intended to do. Zuri sat at her desk, a mug of coffee cooling beside her, her mind alive with every detail of the plan. She wanted her return to her family's estate to be unforgettable, not loud or angry, but impossible to ignore. The idea had started as a spark of boldness in her apartment, and now it was turning into a full-blown strategy. She pulled out her phone and called Nia, her trusted assistant, whose efficiency she relied on more than anyone else. "Nia, we need to make this perfect," she said, her voice calm but firm. Timing, presentation, everything. Together, they went through every aspect, the route, the arrival, even the position of the helicopter on the estate ground. Zuri wanted the landing to be smooth, almost cinematic, with all eyes drawn to her as she stepped out. She imagined the gasp, the sudden silence, the realization in their faces that she was not to be overlooked. Next came her car. Her luxury vehicle had to arrive first, parked strategically to complement the spectacle. She checked the interior, the shine on the body, even the placement of her personal items. Every visual cue mattered. Every detail was part of the story she was about to tell. Nia made a list of tasks, from coordinating the pilot to double-checking weather reports. Zuri insisted on perfection. No chance for mishaps, no chance for anything to distract from the moment. As she finalized the plan, Zuri's mind was a mixture of excitement and calm focus. She imagined the guests inside, laughing and praising Lela, completely unaware that the evening was about to change. Every second, every move had to create maximum impact without a single word spoken. She ran through contingencies. What if the landing was delayed? What if the crowd didn't notice at first? Every scenario had an answer. By mid-afternoon, everything was confirmed. The helicopter was ready, the pilot briefed, Nia had her checklist, and the car gleamed in the driveway of a nearby safe location, ready to make the journey with precision timing. Zuri leaned back in her chair, satisfied. The plan wasn't just about drama. It was about strategy, control, and subtle power. She smiled, thinking about the stunned expressions on their faces, the shift in energy she would create. Every detail mattered because this wasn't just a show, it was a statement. Zuri had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to be ignored, and tonight, she would make them see her. She closed her laptop, feeling a mix of nerves and exhilaration, knowing that in a few hours, she would step back into a room full of people who had underestimated her. The anticipation pulsed through her veins like electricity. This was her moment, and she was ready to make it unforgettable. The dining room buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses as Amina took center stage, her voice full of pride. "We are so lucky to have Lela in the family," she said, smiling broadly. "Always achieving, always impressive. The family favorite, really." Relatives laughed, some raising their glasses in agreement, while others whispered quietly, echoing the sentiment. The words hit like a cold wave, invisible to Zuri's absent ears, but impossible to ignore in memory. Around the table, everyone seemed caught up in Lela's supposed successes. Cousins recounted her small wins, finishing a project at work, a brief recognition at school, and everyone nodded as though these were monumental achievements. Compliments flowed freely, laughter punctuating each exaggeration. Zuri's absence wasn't noted, or if it was, it barely mattered. Her family assumed she was indifferent, perhaps busy with work or uninterested in the gathering. The energy in the room was light, celebratory on the surface, but beneath it, Zuri could sense the tension building even from afar in her mind. The more they praised Lela, the more glaring the injustice became. It wasn't just that her mother overlooked her. It was that they all seemed to enjoy it, as if her hard work and dedication didn't even exist. Her absence became a blank space, ignored by those who should have seen her years of sacrifice. Lela sat comfortably in the center, glowing under the attention, answering compliments with practiced humility. The family's adoration felt rehearsed, a performance designed to affirm the hierarchy Amina had always maintained. Zuri imagined their expressions, the soft glances of admiration for her sister, the nods of approval, the quiet assumptions that she didn't care or wasn't important. It was a web of complacency, one they had spun so tightly that anyone unfamiliar with the real story, like the distant neighbors or extended family, would never guess the truth. The more Zuri thought about it, the sharper her resolve became. Every toast, every compliment to Lela, every oblivious glance away from her absence was fuel. She saw clearly now how little recognition she had received over the years, how easily her family overlooked real accomplishments in favor of what was convenient or easy to celebrate. And yet, in the midst of this complacency, she also saw the opportunity, the perfect moment to disrupt it, to shift the attention, to make them truly see her. The laughter continued, the glasses clinked, and the conversation circled around Lela's minor triumph. The family remained blind to the storm brewing, confident that Zuri was still the quiet, indifferent sister they had always believed her to be. They didn't know she was watching, planning, calculating. And that ignorance, complacency masquerading as confidence, was exactly what she would use to her advantage. The chatter in the dining room faltered as a low hum grew outside, almost imperceptible at first. Then a shadow passed over the estate, drawing every eye to the sky. Guests murmured in confusion, some stepping toward the windows, phones raised to capture whatever was happening. A sleek helicopter appeared, gliding through the Lagos sunset, descending slowly onto the manicured lawn. The sound of the blades sliced through the laughter and conversation, creating a sudden, electric tension. People spilled out onto the terrace and garden, craning their necks, whispering in disbelief. Amina clutched her glass, her confident smile faltering as she squinted at the aircraft. Lela's eyes widened, a mix of shock and panic crossing her face. For once, she wasn't the center of attention. Something much larger, much more spectacular, had arrived. The helicopter landed gracefully, the blades slowing, and a door swung open. Zuri stepped out, every inch the picture of poise and confidence. She wore a tailored outfit that exuded elegance without shouting for attention. In one hand, she carried documents and plaques, evidence of her thriving business deals and her professional accomplishments. She didn't need to yell, she didn't need theatrics. Her presence alone spoke volume. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some guests whispered her name, others simply stared, unable to process the sudden shift in energy. Zuri's gaze swept over her family, noting the flicker of surprise and confusion on their faces. Her mother's expression tightened, a mixture of pride and unease, while Lela's composure cracked ever so slightly. The room that had been filled with laughter and complacency now felt charged, electric, as if everyone suddenly realized the weight of Zuri's absence and the power of her presence. Zuri moved with calm authority, descending the steps from the helicopter with precision, each step measured to command attention. She didn't rush, she didn't stumble. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a path for her, as though the world had acknowledged that she belonged at the center now. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and whispers grew into astonished murmurs. It was more than a dramatic entrance. It was a statement. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated to create maximum impact, and the effect was undeniable. Zuri had taken years of overlooked effort, of ignored achievements, and transformed them into a moment no one could dismiss. In that instant, she wasn't just a sister or a daughter. She was a force visible and undeniable. As she reached the top of the steps, the crowd's murmurs softened into stunned silence. All eyes were on her, and she held their attention effortlessly. Zuri let a quiet smile cross her face, fully aware of the storm she had stirred, the shock she had delivered, and the power she now commanded simply by showing up. The stage was hers, and she was ready to speak without saying a word. The room was quiet, the chatter fading into an almost palpable tension as Zuri stepped forward, the documents and awards in her hand a silent declaration of everything she had built. She paused for a moment, letting her gaze sweep across the gathered family, letting the surprise linger. Then she spoke, her voice calm but clear, commanding attention without a hint of anger. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began, her tone warm but deliberate. "It's not often we take a moment to reflect on hard work and dedication, on the sacrifices that go into building something meaningful." She held up a framed certificate from a major investor, then a tablet showing her company's latest achievements. "These are the results of years of effort, late nights, and relentless focus. Each deal, each milestone, Each step forward has been earned through commitment, not luck. Guests murmured among themselves, eyes widening at the evidence of her success. Zuri let the pause linger, allowing her accomplishments to speak as loudly as her words. She continued, carefully, deliberately, without pointing fingers, yet making her point unmistakable. I've noticed over the years that sometimes our family celebrates what's easiest to see, the small victories that come naturally. But hard work, the kind that happens behind the scenes, often goes unnoticed. I hope tonight can be a reminder that every effort, every achievement, deserves acknowledgement. Her words hit with subtle precision. There was no accusation, no shout, but the meaning was clear. The family shifted uneasily. Lela looked down at her hands, her smile faltering. Amina's lips pressed into a thin line, her earlier confidence shaken. Even distant relatives, who had only half followed the family dynamics, now sensed the imbalance they had ignored for years. Zuri's calm composure contrasted with the impact of her presence. The humility in her posture, the quiet power of her wealth and achievements, created a striking juxtaposition. She didn't need to boast. The evidence of her work, coupled with her poised delivery, did the talking. I'm proud of what I've built, and I hope my journey inspires anyone here to recognize the value of dedication, she said, closing the small speech with a nod. The room remained silent, a collective pause that spoke volume. Zuri had shifted the energy entirely, replacing the laughter and complacency with respect, awe, and a hint of discomfort. Her achievements were undeniable, her presence commanding, and her message clear without ever raising her voice. As she set the awards down, eyes still following her every move, Zuri felt a quiet satisfaction. She had made her statement, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with evidence, grace, and authority. Tonight, she had changed the way her family would see her forever. They had underestimated her, overlooked her, and dismissed her for too long. Now there was no denying who she truly was, and the silence in the room made it impossible to forget. Lela's smile faltered the moment Zuri began speaking. She had expected attention, applause, maybe a few compliments from family members who had long praised her as the favorite. But this was something she hadn't prepared for. Her heart raced, and a tight knot formed in her stomach as she watched Zuri calmly present her achievements, each word and gesture precise and full of quiet authority. She tried to hold her posture, sitting up straight and forcing a polite smile, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. Every time Zuri mentioned the dedication, sacrifices, and hard work that had gone into building her success, Lela felt an uncomfortable pang of jealousy. The admiration she had once soaked in now felt hollow, replaced by a growing sense that her place at the center of attention was no longer secure. She looked around at the relatives, noticing their eyes shift, their expressions softening or widening in surprise. The whispers she had relied on to bolster her image now carried doubt instead. For years, Lela had been praised for minor achievements, and she had grown used to the spotlight. Tonight, that spotlight was no longer hers alone. Zuri's confident presence and the tangible proof of her success dismantled the carefully maintained image of the perfect daughter that Lela had benefited. She felt the subtle sting of embarrassment as she realized her family was beginning to see the truth. Hard work and talent couldn't be overshadowed by charm or convenience. Lela shifted in her seat, fidgeting slightly, trying to regain composure, but every attempt felt forced. Her hands twisted in her lap, and her laughter at the family's initial praise of her now seemed awkward and out of place. Even her mother, Amina, struggled to maintain her previous confidence, glancing between the sisters with a mixture of pride and unease. Lela's favorite status, once taken for granted, was crumbling before her eyes. She couldn't help but compare herself to Zuri in that moment. Her sister had not only achieved incredible success, but had also delivered it with poise and strategic brilliance. Lela's achievements, once loudly celebrated, now felt small and insignificant in comparison. It was a revelation she couldn't ignore, and it left her feeling exposed in a way she had never experienced. By the end of Zuri's speech, the room's energy had shifted completely. Relatives who had laughed and toasted Lela's accomplishments now looked thoughtful, some nodding in quiet admiration for Zuri. Lela sat back, her usual confidence replaced by an uneasy awareness that the hierarchy in the family had changed. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that favoritism had blinded everyone to Zuri's true value, and the image she had relied on for attention and praise was no longer enough to maintain her position. In that moment, Lela understood the power of Zuri's presence, the undeniable weight of her achievements, and the subtle but devastating way she had recalibrated the family's perception. Jealousy and embarrassment lingered, but beneath them was a grudging respect she hadn't expected, and a realization that the game had changed forever. The room felt different now. The chatter that had once revolved around Lela's small accomplishments had quieted, replaced by a new energy that followed Zuri wherever she moved. She noticed the way relatives who had once doubted her now looked at her with something approaching admiration. Their eyes lingered, their smiles cautious but genuine, and even a few nodded as she passed by, as if acknowledging a truth they had long ignored. Zuri approached her uncle, a man who had always questioned her choices, dismissing her tech startup as a hobby rather than a serious business. "Uncle," she said, handing him one of the documents that summarized her recent deals, "I thought you might find this interesting. It's been a challenging year, but we managed to expand internationally." His eyebrows lifted, surprise mixed with respect. For the first time, he didn't offer a polite nod or a dismissive smile. He listened, genuinely engaged, and Zuri felt a quiet satisfaction at the shift. She moved through the crowd, engaging cousins, aunts, and even distant relatives. Each conversation was brief but purposeful. She didn't need to boast, only to make herself visible in a way that couldn't be ignored. The gestures, the proof of her achievements, and the calm confidence she radiated were all part of a statement she had made with precision. Family members who had overlooked her efforts for years now had to reckon with her success, and they did so in real time, one interaction at a time. Even Lela, still seated with a mix of jealousy and lingering embarrassment, watched as Zuri navigated the room effortlessly. The power dynamic that had long favored her younger sister was shifting, subtly but undeniably. By the time Zuri reached her mother, Amina, she felt the change most clearly. Amina's eyes met hers, a flicker of pride mixed with surprise. No words were needed. The respect was in the glance, in the unspoken acknowledgement that Zuri had earned her place not through favoritism or charm, but through talent, perseverance, and strategic thinking. Zuri's independence was clear. She didn't rely on approval or validation. She commanded respect through her accomplishments and the quiet assurance that she belonged. The family's assumptions about who was the favorite had crumbled, replaced by a recognition of genuine merit. She had reclaimed more than acknowledgement. She had reshaped their understanding of what mattered, proving that favoritism could never overshadow real talent. By the end of the evening, Zuri's presence had left a lasting impression. Conversations that had begun with awkward glances and polite niceties now carried hints of curiosity and admiration. Relatives approached her with questions, congratulations, and even small gestures of reconciliation. In those moments, Zuri understood that she had done more than make a statement. She had redefined her role within her family. Her actions had carved out a space where respect was earned and seen, a space she had claimed through skill, strategy, and undeniable perseverance. For the first time in years, Zuri walked among her family not as the overlooked daughter, but as a force they could no longer ignore, and the quiet satisfaction that came with that realization filled her entirely. Zuri walked away from the estate with a calm sense of satisfaction. The night had been more than a dramatic entrance or a public statement. It had been the culmination of years of effort, sacrifice, and determination. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The late nights in Abuja, the countless meetings with investors, the moments when she had doubted herself but pushed forward anyway. Each challenge had shaped her, and tonight, she had finally shown her family the truth of her accomplishment. As she settled into her car, the city lights of Lagos stretching ahead, Zuri felt a quiet pride. She hadn't needed their approval to know her worth, but having them see it, even if just a little, added a sense of closure. The whispers of favoritism, the overlooked milestones, the years of being underestimated, they no longer defined her. She had taken control of her story, turning humiliation into strategy and resentment into empowerment. Zuri's thoughts drifted to Lela, to her mother, and to every family member who had doubted her. She didn't feel anger anymore, only clarity. She had earned respect on her own terms, and that was more powerful than any applause or recognition could ever be. The helicopter, the awards, the careful planning, they had all been tools to make a simple point. Hard work, talent, and perseverance can't be ignored, no matter what anyone else believed. As the estate disappeared behind her, Zuri smiled. Tonight wasn't just about proving herself to her family, it was about celebrating herself. She had reclaimed her confidence, her pride, and her dignity. And as she drove through the night, she knew one thing for certain. The power of self-worth was hers to keep, and no one could take it away.